Joining us right now, Democrat of the day. We're heading to 16A, which is basically due west of the metro area, heading over towards the Minnesota border. Doria Drost is kind enough to join us. She's challenging the GOP incumbent there to try to carry the DFL and 16A for her for the day on Election Day. Doria, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
My absolute pleasure. I appreciate the time. How are things going with your campaign? How are things out there in 16A right now?
Oh my goodness, it has been an absolute whirlwind. Obviously, this election season, things are definitely unprecedented with COVID-19 and trying to kind of navigate that, as well as being a first-time candidate. But it's been wonderful connecting with all the people in my district.
Why don't you give everyone a little bit of a background? Who exactly is Doria Drost?
Yeah, so I am a almost pretty much lifelong resident of Southwest Minnesota. I grew up on a farm near Rushmore, Minnesota, which a lot of people confuse that with Mount Rushmore. It's not Mount Rushmore. It's a little small town right outside of the Worthington area. We have a bar and a baseball field, and that's about it. And I come from a very agricultural background. I've lived in the Marshall area now since 2017, so quite a few years. I attended their university, Southwest Minnesota State University, where I got my bachelor's in marketing and political science. And now I am returning to complete my master's degree in business administration as well.
Mm-hmm. What prompted you one day? I mean, obviously you love the district. You love being down there in the community. What prompted
absolutely.
you? What prompted you one day to say, you know what, I'm going to run for office here?
Yeah, so throughout my undergraduate, and this is actually kind of a funny story, my forensics coach, which forensics is competitive speech at the collegiate level, through that organization, all through my undergrad, I did a lot of advocacy work for like student rights and women's rights and racial equity. And that really is what got me interested in legislative policies and decision making at the state and national level. And my coach, Ben Walker, he reached out to me one day in January, and he goes, "Have you ever considered running for office?" And I go, "Well, eventually, I mean, first female president, let's do this." And he goes, "Well, you know, we have this opening. We're looking for somebody to run for the Minnesota State House seat for the district. Would you be interested?" I told him, I was like, "Well, yeah, let me think about it." And I started doing some research into the policy backings and inaction from the incumbent that's currently in the seat. And that really, it enraged me because our rural communities deserve so much better. So I got back with Ben, who's now my campaign manager, and I told him, I was like, you know, let's do this. Let's be the change in the district, and let's represent our rural communities at the state level proudly. So that's really what got me interested in running so early.
Doria Drost joining us, 16A, Democrat of the Day. I would be remiss. You have a story out of your district here, which has become a national story, and I wouldn't mind, if you don't mind me asking just your thoughts on this. This would be the individuals in Marshall at the Walmart wearing the Nazi face masks and actually giving a Nazi salute in protest of the face mask policy. What are your thoughts on that? Because once again, this is one of those things where, because of this incident, you know, the district is getting attention. Unfortunately, it's the wrong kind of attention, the kind of attention that, you know, does not help a community, especially try to shake the idea that it's not a welcoming community.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I'm proud to be from rural Minnesota, but when individuals take actions like that are so blatantly racist and disrespectful to our communities of color, it's really disappointing. And it doesn't surprise me that this has reached the national news outlets, because it's an outrage. Communities of color, I feel with them, I stand with them, and it's shameful that we have people in our communities that would be so blatantly disrespectful, especially in the form of a World War II Nazi Germany symbolization of the swastika. And to just represent Marshall and their communities through those actions is very disappointing. And it definitely makes me feel, as somebody that's running for elected office, that we must do better, especially at the state level, to really combat this racism and to make policy changes that help promote and equalize the system to uplift communities of color, because they have been marginalized for way too long.
And I'm going to say this. This is going to be me saying this. We have the story, and I'll get to this a little bit later on this hour, of the Wabasha County on the far eastern side of the state. The Republican Party out there basically trying to compare wearing face masks to the Nazis, making the Jews wear, stars of David. And, so there clearly is, and I'll say this, I mean, regardless of whether or not Jennifer Carnahan, the head of the Minnesota GOP, is outraged or not, the reality is this is clearly something that is, when you look at the Wabasha County Republican Party putting this out, this is something that's being pushed in certain circles, which is, this is, I think, the narrative they're trying to use to win this election cycle. And I agree with you. I have zero tolerance for it. And sure, I guess to get your base on board, I mean, I'll go back to the old Simpsons line when they said, the Republican Party, not racist, but it's number one with racist. And that's kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
If that's where you're at, that's where you're at. I will say, I want to branch out a little bit from this, because obviously we are dealing with, and the reason we have face mask policy is this coronavirus. Talk, if you don't mind. I know the western part of the state and the southwestern part of the state have been hit really hard by this coronavirus problem. How are the medical facilities holding up, and where do you think you could make improvements if you became the representative for 16A?
Yeah, so honestly, our medical facilities here in Southwest Minnesota are increasingly overwhelmed. I mean, with the recent spikes in the virus, it's definitely hard for our medical staff and professionals to keep up. And not just that, but at any given time, I mean, Southwest Minnesota compared to like the metropolitan area, our resources for healthcare are so limited. And that's actually one of the platform items that I'm running on. We lack the necessary facilities to care for our populations. And then if you have individuals that are covered with state insurance, that becomes even more increasingly difficult for them to find providers to care for them and also accept their coverage. So it's definitely been a challenge in the midst of this pandemic to find the staffing and the resources to care for our communities the way that they deserve to be cared for.
And it's, once again, I mean, the worst thing about the pandemic is it exposes the failure of America's healthcare system, which is not the quality. We have the best healthcare on the planet. It's that we've allowed the healthcare industry to become such a business that they don't understand the purpose of healthcare is not to do it on the cheap. It's to basically make sure people can be taken care of. And when you're doing when hospitals have to do bed counts because it's basically they have to cut costs. Well, the nightmare scenario is a pandemic, and then all of a sudden we realize, well, maybe cutting costs is not the place to be. I agree with one thing that, and this goes into education as well, the idea that we need to get the broadband going better, because if we're not going to be able to get the investment into these hospitals and medical facilities that we need at least need to be able to have doctors on call that can, at least for the temporary until we can get the funding that we need, to be able to help the local community.
Absolutely. I think border-to-border broadband should be a top legislative priority, especially in the upcoming sessions following this election.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. And this piggybacks into education. We are going to try to, I know there are going to be some places, I heard in the metro area, Benel St. Margaret's going to try to do, it sounds like they're going to try to do in-person classes, full school. I don't think that's going to work. I'm not trying to be blithe. I'm just saying this is a pandemic. You generally just don't do this sort of thing. Regardless, even when schools were in session, the lack of quality broadband in outstate Minnesota in 16A was causing a lot of problems for the students and the teachers in these education systems. Now we're in a situation where we desperately need quality broadband or at least internet access. And frankly, every day a kid going to a coffee shop so they can get a free Wi-Fi is not a good option. That border-to-border broadband, I mean, the impacts of that, it's not just medical, it's not just education, and the business impacts as well. It's a quality of life issue at this point, and it's just so darn disappointing. The Republicans who promised broadband decades ago have still not delivered on that.
Exactly. And I 100% agree with you. It's a healthcare issue. It's an education issue. It's a business issue. It's also an agricultural issue. I mean,
Yeah.
our world has become so dependent on these technological developments, and just the fact that we don't have border to border broadband already just shows how far behind we are in changing to adapt to the times.
And yeah, it's a shame when a farmer has to go into their tractor, which might be the best computer they have in their house, and have to use that for basic information. When the reality is that they should be able to a kid should be able to be at home. A farmer, when they get up in the morning or they go to bed at night, should be able to check prices. They should be able to tie into their co-op directly. There's a lot of potential here that we are just missing. And it's now at the point where I think the state has an obligation to step up now. If private business doesn't want to do it, well, then let's just do it ourselves. And the state, we can have the state manage it, but at least get broadband out there, because it is actually hurting us now far more than not having it. I mean, it really is. It's getting detrimental to the communities.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we could be doing so much more. I mean, privatization is definitely a major issue in so many different sectors. I mean, if you look at the healthcare industry, the privatization with insurance and prescription drugs, I mean, that is just, I think that should be illegal. I mean, healthcare is a human right. And border to border broadband, I mean, that's another step in the right direction to making sure that everybody's living as equitably as possible.
Couldn't agree with you more. The idea that we dangle, insulin for diabetics in front of them like it's a carrot in front of a mule because, God forbid, some guy doesn't get his fourth vacation home, I think is a travesty. And, I understand that people say, well, let private business do it. But, I mean, there comes a point where if private business isn't doing it, it has a responsibility of the state to step on in. I think you should go to St. Paul and champion that.
I would absolutely love to. I am completely on board for that. I think the Alex Smith Emergency Insulin Act was definitely a step in the right direction, but I feel that our state could do so much more to protect those individuals that need those life-saving medications.
This is the point where I say, if you are in the metro area, you're listening to me right now, help your local Democrat. Of course, the DFL needs help in all districts. But if you've got some time, if you've got some money, we need to make sure we get as many of these House seats in the Democratic side as possible. Look at currently Kurt Dowd holding up a bonding bill because they just, not because they don't like what's in the bonding bill, but they want to rein in Governor Walz's powers. And I think that's not good politics. We need to have a stronger House, a stronger DFL House, and that is why we need Doria Drost in the House. So if I'm not mistaken, I got it here. I think it's DoriaDrostForHouse.com, right?
Yes. Yep. There's a contact form on my website. Tons of information about who I am and what I stand for on there as well.
And people can donate. I mean, your volunteer opportunities, I imagine, once again, in the age of COVID, where you're dealing with stuff, phone banking. But that's the nice thing about phone banking. You can do it from a distance.
Yeah. We're doing phone banking. And then just because of the whole COVID pandemic, we're doing no contact lit dropping instead of going door to door canvassing.
All right. If people can help out, and once again, you need to get out of your comfort zone in the Twin Cities. You need to get out to 16A. You need to go out there and volunteer. You need to make a donation. And I know there's a lot of people asking, but responsibility begins at home. And Minnesota is our home. We need Doria in the Minnesota House. Once again, it's Doria Drost, DORIA Drost, DROST for House.com. Doria, I'll link to everything a little bit later on. Hopefully we can get some volunteers, some donations out your way.
Yes. Thank you so much. I love the opportunity to really connect with people on any platform possible. All my best. I hope we do get to see you in St. Paul. Yeah, you definitely got the right mentality and got the heart for the district. So my goodness, I do hope that we get you into 16A. That'd be fantastic. Oh, well, thank you so much.
Doria Drost, Democrat of the Day, 16A.